Okay, in this video, what I want to do is go through some graphs with you that are available to you on Canvas. You can go click on it. This is data from the Federal Reserve, and you'll be able to click on it and see what's going on right now for you. My charts are going to get out of date very quickly. So I want you to be able to go and click on these and look for yourself to see what's currently going on. Now in this video, on this graph here, this is the monetary base. And I'm going to show you this here. And this goes back to, it's like about 1975. And you can see that it was just kind of going up at a nice slow clip over time until about, what's that look like, about 2008? And then the monetary base was increased significantly. Now this is because that shaded area on the graph is a recession, a downturn in the business cycle. And the increase in the money supply was to stimulate the economy. This was during a financial crisis, and it was to help out the economy and stimulate the economy. Ben Bernanke was head of the Federal Reserve at that time. He increased the monetary base, you can see here, from under 1 trillion all the way up to 4 trillion. So he quadrupled the monetary base. This is why, for a while, Ben Bernanke was known as Helicopter Ben, known for a helicopter drop of increasing the money supply, because he increased it so much. Never before had the money supply gone up by that amount. Then it was slowly coming back down to about 3 trillion. They wanted to bring it back down to something more normal. But then in 2020, another recession because of the pandemic caused them to, Jay Powell, who's head of the Federal Reserve, to once again increase the monetary base significantly to avert these problems that the recession causes. And he brought the monetary base up to higher than 5 billion. Now here's a graph of M1, and this goes back to about 1955. You can see how the money supply as M1 was going up slowly over time. And then once again in that recession, in 2007, 2008, that financial crisis where the banks were all failing, you can see that the increase in M0, the monetary base, had an effect on M1. You can see M1 going up significantly after that. Then you can also see in 2020 where M1 started to skyrocket also. And that's because of this increases in the monetary base by the Federal Reserve. It's being translated to an increase in M1. Now, if you look at what happened in 2008 here, M1 went up from about, 1.5 trillion, eventually up to about 4 trillion. Not quite a quadrupling. They increased the monetary base by a factor of 4, but it didn't quadruple M1. Well, why not? Let me show you a couple of other graphs. Here's a graph of excess reserves. And remember, the amount that banks decide to keep in excess reserves affects this money multiplier, and it affects what M1 is going to be. So you can see that this goes back to 1980. Excess reserves were essentially zero up until that financial crisis in 2008. Why were they zero? Because the Fed gave 0% interest on reserves. So there was no reason to start keeping excess reserves. During that financial crisis, the Fed decided to start paying interest on reserves. Couple of reasons. One, they might be able to control the amount of excess reserves that banks kept, and also because they wanted to inject some money into the banking system. And by paying them some interest on the reserves, they could give them some money and have less chance of banks failing. And that was a big concern at that time, of the banks failing. So you can see what the excess reserves did. They went up almost to $3 trillion. So a lot of that monetary-based stimulation that the Fed did during the financial crisis, a lot of that money just went into excess reserves, and it didn't really increase M1 as much because of that. If they didn't put all this money in excess reserves, then M1 would have gone up quite a bit more. Then you can also see in 2020, banks started keeping excess reserves again, mainly because they were concerned about loaning the money out. So two reasons why banks keep excess reserves. One is, depends on the interest that they can get on them. And the other is, well, what is the alternative? And sometimes it's better to keep some excess reserves on hand in case of things like bank runs, keep a better cash position. So you can see they increased the excess reserves quite a bit during that time. Now in this next video, I want to show you is the currency component of M1, which means cash in circulation. This, the Fed doesn't have much ability to control, but it certainly affects the money multiplier and affects M1. If people decide to hold on to more money that they have and not put it in their checking accounts, then M1 is not going to increase by as much if there's new money printed in the monetary base. So you can see here that during that financial crisis, people started keeping a whole lot more money in circulation, just cash. Also, you can see a big jump up there in 2020. A lot of people started holding a lot more cash too, for security. Rational to do that, just to keep a lot more cash on hand, but also because interest rates were so low. As interest rates come down, then the opportunity cost of holding money goes way down too. If interest rates are very high, you don't want to keep a lot of cash on hand, put it in the bank where you can earn some interest. But if interest rates are almost zero, there's no real cost to holding on to cash and money. Now in this last graph, I just want to show you M2, what that's been over time. This goes back to about 1980. And you can see during that financial crisis of 2008, monetary base exploded. M1 went up, but not nearly as much as the monetary base, because banks started keeping excess reserves and people started keeping more cash on hand. M2 increased up, but not a real significant increase in M2. Now you can see in 2020, for this recession, M2 started to go up significantly. Okay, that's the last graph I want to show you. Be sure you go through yourself, click on those graphs and see what the current numbers are for the monetary base, M1, M2, excess reserves, and cash in circulation. Those are the important ones when trying to look at the money supply. And if we're interested in inflation, what inflation is going to be, then we need to look at these money supply numbers. Now, when the Fed starts increasing the money supply significantly, the monetary base, people are concerned, naturally, there's going to be inflation, like the quantity theory. But we have to look and see what's going to happen, not just the monetary base, but the M1 or M2. Those are a better measure of the money supply to determine what's going to happen with inflation. Then we also need to look at the velocity of money, because that's important when it comes to inflation. So if the money supply goes up with a lot, whether it's M1 or M2, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be inflation either if the velocity of money starts falling. So in the financial crisis, 2008, the big question is, well, where was the inflation? Didn't see any extra inflation during that time period. Why not? Big increase in the money supply, M0, but no inflation. Well, M1 didn't go up quite as much as the monetary base. M2 it went up even less than the monetary base. And the velocity fell.